Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to thank the government of the Slovak Republic for inviting me to this 2012 edition of the ITAPA Congress. I very much regret not to be with you and participate in these exchanges among policymakers and private sector. No doubt, e-government remains a strategic resource for promoting innovation and public administrations and building more agile, effective and responsive governments. However, let me suggest this morning that e-government in 2012 is different from 2002 or even 2007. Why is that? There are two reasons. One, because governments are facing new, unprecedented challenges with major implications for e-government. The most obvious are the significant constraints which in many countries have prompted progress to be scaled back or operations to be cut, or both. Cuts in program spending mean less money for digitization agendas, for example in healthcare or education. Cuts in operational spending mean e-government leaders need to rationalize ICT operations and justify spending. Similar pressures can be observed in overall ICT spending in different OECD regions in form of subdued growth since the recession in 2009. E-government has to make its business case against much tougher criteria these days to prove it can enable and deliver more efficiently quality public services and the execution of public policies. And we can, of course, improve citizens' and business satisfaction. It is, for example, no longer enough to say that cloud computing rationalizes ICT expenditures in government. Auditors and stakeholders want to know by how much. This means government departments need to track and assess rates of return on e-government investments with much more rigor. In this context, the role and responsibilities of e-government leaders are changing, and new relationships emerge between them, their policy colleagues, and business and financial leaders. There's a general sense of uncertainty as to the role of e-government leaders. Should they take on strategic objectives, or should they rather focus on operational targets such as cost reduction? But caution needs to be taken, not to add to an emerging feeling of reform fatigue. In 2008, when the global financial crisis hit, many policymakers endorsed and expanded public sector reform efforts to focus government's time and resources on the country's pressing needs. This is causing a reform fatigue on a number of citizens and civil servants that had to bear the sacrifice, for example, of lower wages or reduced public services. What are the main reasons, symptoms, and implications of this fatigue, and how can e-government help addressing them? And this is also where e-government in 2012 is different. Because of new and immense opportunities to engage all parts of the population. Today, an increasing share of citizens are very familiar with IT, both in their private life and in their workplaces. Internet adoption in OECD countries stands at, on average, 67% of households reporting a broadband subscription. What is even more striking and worthwhile to recall is the fact that over 50% of the adult population in OECD countries have mobile devices that access the internet. In the top running countries, Korea and Sweden in particular, we are looking actually at almost 100% of the population that access the internet while they're on the move. This means for governments that they have great opportunities to harness citizen engagement, transparency, inclusion, and ultimately trust in government. The Open Government Partnership established last year testifies to the determination of governments. At the same time, citizens and business want to know more, see more, hear more, and be heard more. They expect governments to be available 24/7. The rapid advent of mobile technologies is driving demand for always-on governments, more responsive service delivery, and more networked and participatory governance. Mobile government solutions can, for example, bridge spatial divides in the delivery of healthcare and provide new treatment opportunities to people living in underserved areas or people with disabilities. They can also allow citizens' engagement in service delivery, as illustrated by the Fix My Street initiative in the UK, which combines the value of m-government with opening up public data. At the same time, of course, we must ensure coherence across delivery channels and avoid new digital divides. Now, what does that all mean for going forward? Governments, first of all, need to reinforce their capacities to demonstrate the benefits of e-government. We know, of course, that e-government brings down silos, favors joined-up governments, and facilitates open interaction with citizens. Cases like the P-Direct initiative in the Netherlands show how e-government can help to break interdepartmental barriers, creating public-private partnerships, increasing flexibility, and enabling costs reduction. The question, though, is, but by how much, where, and when are the definite benefits? At the OECD, we are working with many of you to identify the necessary evidence and to conduct comparisons that help us all learn from good practices abroad. Nevertheless, ICT impact analysis has still a long way to go before we can say how the roughly 2% of government spending on ICTs affects the remaining 98% of government expenditures. There is no alternative. Evidence-based IT policies require more data. Gathering data and opening them up to public scrutiny and private use will create greater transparency, the underlying principle of open government and open government data movements. While the public expects governments to embrace social media for two-way communications, how to do so? How to adapt the institutional fundamentals of public governance as we think of it today? How to align online practices to offline decision-making processes? The magnitude of opportunities and challenges should make it clear that looking for answers has to be a collective and concerted effort. At the OECD, we are now directly engaged with many of you to establish a set of guiding principles for e-government. The project was the result of this year's OECD e-leaders meeting, and we look forward to engaging with many of you at the different stages of this project. More importantly, we will hope to see you at the next OECD e-leaders meeting in fall 2013. This time, though, in real, not in digital. I wish you a very fruitful meeting. Thank you very much.